Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel, where it is time once again for Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier alongside my great friend, Mr. Brent Beaird. Brent, of course, a longtime college football analyst. Most recently for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in all of collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, I figured tonight, and we are live, by the way, on Reier on YouTube on
Mhm.
a Thursday night, June the 19th. So if you'd like to jump into the show chat, the show comments, we'd love to hear from you here on the program. Brent, I figured we'd get maybe a little more team specific in the upcoming weeks. We've got some time here in the off season, and I know we've passed some important mile markers, whether it was SEC spring meetings, whether it was
Right.
the appearance of those
Mhm.
coveted
Mhm.
college football magazines, and we're still going to see some more of those, I guess, in the coming days and weeks.
Yes.
But team specific, we're going to talk about Alabama tonight. Year two under Kalen DeBoer. We'll get into the Crimson Tide as it looks to reassert itself as a college football playoff team. And I guess there's not a lot of news otherwise. We've got, I guess, salary cap stuff to maybe preview as we look down the road a little bit in collegiate athletics. How that's going to play into college football. We certainly anticipate that being a
Mhm.
big thing, but how it plays into transfer portal dates, how it plays into signing day,
Mhm.
those type of things also up in the air.
Listen, that what and look, you and I share the same frustration with this. It's time to quit talking and make some decisions. And the good thing is, every now and then the calendar makes us make decisions, and they have got to make decisions try by July 1. That's when this money drops.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing that they're working on, and I'll be brief about this, is and you know we've talked about this. They've got to make the calendar work for them instead of them working for the calendar. And
Yeah.
what we mean by that is what Travis just said. What is in the works is they're going to move signing day, believe it or not, from December and February through either June, July, or August or September.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I've talked about this for years. That when a player's made up his mind, and after some official visits in June, maybe it's time to do that. So that's one thing. The other thing is I've got to decide on the portal. Do they want one or two? And the big conferences are split on that. The Big Ten wants two, or in spring, and the SEC is adamant. Trav, they want it in January for it not to affect anything else. And the other thing is, which is also very fascinating, is because of this, the money dropping and the salary um, coming through for these players, shall we say, is the fact that they're talking about OTAs.
Yeah.
Besides spring having OTAs in May and June. Um, so Trav, my thing is, if they get those three things done before July 1st, would you say that's some progress?
I would say it is. I would say it's certainly advancement towards some semblance of what we're going to have for the
Mm-hmm.
foreseeable future. Some structure, at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some bumper rails, if you want to call it that. And it's fascinating too in terms of how the whole approach is going to evolve. Just using college football as the example, because I think you're already seeing moves in
Mm-hmm.
programs
Mm-hmm.
that are aligning with front offices in the NFL.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
seeing a lot of that already in terms of how they're putting together these, for lack of a better way of putting it, front offices,
Yeah.
and how that's going to work moving forward. And I talked about this on a radio show this week that I was on. The money isn't going to be free to the players. They're going to
Mm-mm.
get
Mm-mm.
they're going to get their share, but there's going to be more asked of players. Okay, we're going to share revenue. Well, guess what? We got to create more revenue
Yeah,
as a result of
absolutely.
that. So when we
Oh,
do these
yeah.
off-season sort of junkets that typically were maybe the men's basketball coach and the football coach would go around to maybe 4 or 5 cities,
Mhm.
address booster clubs like you see in Jacksonville with the Gator clubs or
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
Bulldog clubs, or in Alabama, the Red Elephant clubs, those type of things. You're going to have to go too. You're going to need to go
That's right.
and appear and help us raise money. And you're already seeing that. I mean, you've
Oh,
already
yeah.
seen it at places like
Yeah.
Alabama
Yeah.
and some other places, but it's just going to be an entirely different dynamic. There's no doubt about it. We've basically, from a recruiting calendar perspective, we basically already turned June into January with the
Yeah.
visits.
We
You
have,
know,
haven't we? Yeah.
Traditionally, official visits were January years ago. That
Mhm.
was the big month. And then
Mhm.
February, you'd have a signing day.
Mhm.
You might as well go ahead and put a signing date in July or
Absolutely.
August or September. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess even with that, it's still trying to lay out the salary cap era
Yeah.
of college athletics
Oh,
and how
oh,
you
yeah.
make that all work. The transfer portal to me is probably the biggest thing coaches want dealt with. It seems like
Mhm.
anyway. What you hear
Mhm.
consistently from the coaching perspective is we got to get the portal figured out more than just about anything else we're talking about. So there is still a lot to sort of um, come to grips with and get
Yeah.
aligned. But it does appear as if, at least on the horizon, you can see some things. And then, even from, I guess, a playoff perspective for the future, the end of this year,
Yeah.
December
Yes.
1st, those type of dates, things like that, we've heard in regard to all this as well.
And let me back up something you just said. This happened at Cal. Now I'm sure it's happening at other places, but they made a bigger deal out of it. Justin Wilcox, who frankly is a pretty good football coach,
Hmm.
is now answering. If you look at the organizational chart, Trev, he's now answering to the general manager. He's
Yeah.
not. He's not answering. He's not answering to the AD. Now, I'm not saying the AD doesn't have anything to do with the program, but because he would. But I just find that fascinating. Do you and how and you mentioned this, how some of this is subtly and maybe not so subtly changing.
Well, look at Andrew Luck.
Mhm.
You talk about Ron Rivera. That's who we're
Yeah.
talking about as the GM essentially of Cal football now. Andrew Luck, basically
Yeah.
the same deal at Stanford.
Mhm.
The decision was made to move on from a head coach, and it looks like Andrew Luck sort of is in
Yeah.
that position there at
Yeah.
his alma mater out in Palo Alto. So again, just fascinating times in
Mhm.
collegiate athletics.
Mhm.
You know what else I've kind of picked up on as far as how the revenue sharing is going to work, or the salary cap for athletic departments. Ticketed programs in athletic
Mhm.
departments will
Mhm.
share. It used to be, I guess maybe they figured that's better to call it than non-revenue. Remember, it was non-revenue
Yeah.
sports.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Instead of calling them non-revenue sports, now we just refer to ticketed
Mhm.
sports like
Yeah. Yeah.
basketball, like football,
Mhm.
like softball these days, and its increased popularity. And baseball, by the way, we got a hell of a
Yeah.
College World Series going on
We
out
do.
in Omaha, Nebraska. Had a couple
Yes.
SEC teams slug it out late night Wednesday night, with LSU moving through to the College
Mhm.
World Series Championship Series to take on those Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. Team from South Carolina in the championship series, not named Clemson or South Carolina. Instead, it's Coastal from Conway. But Brent, we want to get into some Alabama specific stuff on this Thursday night. We want to talk about teams buy or sell. When you think about the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Texases, hear a lot about South Carolina in this preseason, even. Tennessee, and how will it be affected by the movement at the quarterback position? But we're going to talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. Um, Buy or sell Alabama as a legitimate national championship contender. Year 2 under Kalen DeBoer. Of course, Alabama in year 1 under Kalen, 9-4, 5-3 in SEC play. We'll get into the schedule, some other things, but we'll start with really the roster, right? Because you
Yes.
got to have
Yeah.
those
Yes.
people if you're even going to be considered as a legitimate option where national
Mhm.
championship candidacy is concerned. We've already talked about Alabama in this regard some this offseason. Definitely
Mhm.
has the look of that kind of team. But like a lot of teams in college football, going through transition at the quarterback position, when you think about Ohio State, you think about Georgia, you think about Alabama, those are the three teams right now that seem to be at the top of the power indexes,
Right.
at the top of the odds
Yeah.
out in Vegas. It's interesting, though, because all three are going to have new starting quarterbacks
They
in
are.
2025.
Yeah. Well, and one of the reasons that everybody loves LSU is because of Garrett Nussmeier, who
Yeah.
has been around now for years and is arguably one of the better quarterbacks anywhere, and has some. But Trev, people are going gaga over Arch Manning, and look, I get that to a degree, and get to his credit when he's been in the game, he's really looked pretty good.
Yeah.
But look, but again, like Stockton. And like Austin Simmons at Ole Miss, and a lot of these guys, they're very limited on experience, aren't they?
They are. And look, I think Arch Manning has a chance to be one of those Mannings that we've
I
already
agree.
seen, whether it's
I agree,
Eli
Brent.
or Peyton. But what I like about Arch's situation, even more than I probably liked about Peyton's, although his Tennessee teams were really, really good, they just
Yeah.
had to deal with Steve Spurrier and those Florida Gators
Yeah, really.
on an annual basis. I like what Arch Manning's going to have around him, and not even so much just on the offensive side of the ball. I think defensively, Texas again has a chance to be
Yeah,
elite
absolutely.
and really can help a young quarterback
Yes.
from that perspective. But when we talk about Alabama, essentially we're talking about Ty Simpson, but maybe we're talking as much about Ryan Grubb
Yes.
reuniting with Kalen DeBoer, taking over that
Yeah.
offense, taking over that quarterback situation. And if you had any kind of questions about Ryan Grubb and the sort of autonomy he
Yeah.
has, even though Kalen is also an offensive guy, when you hear Ryan Grubb talk, it's very clear that's his show. And
Yes.
as
Yes.
it should be. I mean, as a guy who's dropping back
Mhm.
down to the college game from the NFL after a year with the Seattle Seahawks. Um, and what I pick up from Ryan Grubb, not saying that this was a big issue in year one under Kalen DeBoer, but it just sounds like from an accountability standpoint with Ryan Grubb,
Mhm.
that's going to be a very real thing in
Oh, yeah.
2025.
Yeah, well, the players are saying the same thing. They said he's holding us accountable, and he's not letting us by with anything. As Nick Saban loved to say, when you do the little things well, you're going to win ball games, and he's a real believer in that. And as evidenced by, I mean, he and DeBoer have had success together
Yeah.
at Washington. So having him come in, but no, I'm with you. I picked up on that very quickly, and I can tell you, I don't think Ryan Grubb's going to have a lot of guys give him much lip over the next few weeks, and if they do, they'll pay for it.
Yeah, it's a sense that you get that can not only benefit the offensive side of the ball, but can be a team wide benefit.
Yeah, no doubt.
If you've got that type of presence anywhere on your staff. And that's not to
Mhm.
say that Kane Womack doesn't have that sort of residual effect on his guys, but that's the biggest thing I think you're going to pick up on. It just felt like last year accountability
Yes.
wasn't always maybe what Alabama fans
Right.
would like it to be.
Yeah. Yes.
And so when you just think about the pieces on that side of the ball that Ryan Grubb has to work with, and this was another sign to me that it's kind of his show, was he didn't really hesitate in basically saying Ty Simpson's the guy at
Yeah.
quarterback. I
Yeah.
mean, going back to the spring, really. Um, and we heard that pretty much a year ago, but Jalen Milroe was coming off a year in which he had started.
Yes.
So that's a little bit different
Mhm.
than say for Ty Simpson. Now look, Ty Simpson was competing against an early enrollee, a very talented one in Keelan Russell in the spring, more of a developmental guy in Austin Mack at this point in his career. So you expected Ty Simpson to be the guy going into spring practice in March, but it looks as if that absolutely will be the case. And you talk about supporting cast, and we see a lot of things about football teams during June and July. The PFFs, the different outlets, best offensive line in college football, best defensive line in college football. And what we're hearing a lot about Alabama is the expectation, anyway, for that offensive line to be among the very best in college football. And when I think about buy or selling any team like we're talking about with Alabama tonight, I think lines of scrimmage still. I know the game has changed a lot. I still look at offensive and defensive lines first and foremost. And when you do that, the expectation should be for Alabama to be among the elite on the offensive line and also defensively. When you bring back Tim Keenan and you have James Smith stepping into a
Yeah.
bigger role,
Yeah.
and you bring in some guys from the transfer portal on both lines of scrimmage that should fortify the Crimson Tide, whether it's maybe the interior of the offensive line where they brought in Cam Dewberry from Texas A&M. Defensively, they did some of the same things on that defensive line too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question about it. I'm with you on the line. I mean, Wilkin Formby, if he's healthy, I think will be fine. Jane Roberts is one of the best in the SEC. Parker Brailsford is too. I tell you right now, I think this is a playoff team. They've got some issues they've got to work through as it is, but I certainly buy that they are. I think they are. They had a pretty good spring. I think this line not only is going to protect the quarterback, but I think they're going to open up some holes for the running game. We mentioned Ty Simpson a couple of times. I think for Ty, there are two things that are going to be extremely important for him. One of them is he's going to be accurate in a short passing game. Jalen Milroe wasn't. And the second thing is, and one thing I've learned from you over the years, how valuable this is, you got to have a mindset as a quarterback. Now, look, again, there's a lot I like about Jalen Milroe. There's a lot I didn't like about Milroe. What I didn't like about Milroe was, and look, you're going to make mistakes. That's just the way it is. But the problem is when Jalen Milroe made a mistake, he was his mindset was such to where I'm not saying he pouted. Now I'm just saying that it affected him, and he got semi-depressed with this, and that will last sometimes for half an hour. And I think that really hurt him. And I think that's something we've heard about Simpson is he can make the throws. He can, if he can work the mindset and the maturity, he'll get the job, and maybe try if he's at that point.
Yeah, in retrospect, now with Grubb in Tuscaloosa, it's interesting to kind of wonder how situations during last season might have been handled with the quarterback had he been in the job a year ago. Now, ultimately, a lot of times that still goes back to the head coach. So, and maybe that rests more with Kalen DeBoer ultimately in conjunction with Ryan Grubb. But I do agree in that I've said this already this offseason a couple of different times. I think if Ryan Grubb, true to what we've seen in the past, truly wants the quick passing game to be a big part of what this offense does, there is the potential for them to be much improved in the quick game with Ty Simpson than there was. It just wasn't something that was a strength of Jalen Milroe. You can go back to 2023 with Tommy Reese, and there was almost non-existent quick passing game. The quick screens is what we're talking about. Get the ball out quick, and trying to take advantage of playmakers on the perimeter, easy chunk plays that you should be able to get from Ryan Williams.
Absolutely.
And some of these guys. So I think that's an area where they can improve, with Grubb and with Nick Sheridan. You wonder how much of the run game are we actually going to see? Jam Miller comes back as a seasoned back, a guy that can do it both on and off the ball. There'll be some really good competition for those reps beyond him. We've seen Grubb and DeBoer at Washington in the past lean on one back. Now, 2023, they kind of had to do that with Dylan Johnson. I mean, they had some injuries and some depth issues. They don't have depth issues really at running back. Even with Justice Haynes moving on to Michigan, I mean, you look at the running back position, Jam Miller, as we talked about, Richard Young, very talented third-year player, Daniel Hill, a big back.
Oh, yeah.
Who was going into his second year in the program. And they even went to the portal and brought in Dre Washington from Louisiana Lafayette. So they've got quality in terms of talent, maybe not as much experience.
Well, and really the two guys you just mentioned that I may be excited about seeing is a maturity with Young and Hill. I mean, those guys run hard. Those are guys, if it's 3rd and 1, you can give them the ball and they're going to get it done. And I tell you one thing, the mindset's come in the theme so far tonight. I like Young's mindset and Hill too, Trav. I mean, they are not going to be stopped in their mind. And for guys like that, look, I like Jim Miller, and I think he's tremendous. But to your point on the quick passing game, what I wonder is how much of these running backs, and particularly these tight ends, may be used there. I mean, you've got some of the best wide receivers in the nation, frankly, but you can't throw it to them every play. So I'm curious, Trav, how that quick passing game will involve the running backs and the tight ends.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I do think they are going to get those wide receivers involved in that quick game because Ryan Williams, you want to get him as many touches you can get. And then they've got some guys that I think they're high on coming in. Latier Brooks is a freshman. Real playmaker type, not the biggest guy in the world, but one of those kind of guys that can turn a quick touch into something very, very big. But their first 3 guys out there, Alabama's first 3 guys out there at wide receiver should be able to line up with any trio in the country. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard back. What a big bonus that was, getting him for another year. And then Isaiah Horton comes in via the portal from the Miami Hurricanes.
I tell you what, I've talked to some Miami people about Horton, and they loved him. They thought he is a big play guy, that he could really do a lot of things. But you mentioned Bernard. Bernard to me is Mr. Dependable, frankly. So, I mean, and listen, the excitement about this wide receiver crew. Look, I'm not saying this is the 2020 wide receiver room, but this group has as much potential, Trav, as any I've seen at Bama in a while.
Yeah, and they do incorporate the tight end in this offense. So Josh Cuevas back for another year. The Washington transfer was kind of a 2-3 guy last year, but you lose CJ Dupree. You lose your top couple of guys there at the tight end position, the H position. And so Cuevas coming back is a good thing. They have hit the portal for a couple of 3 tight ends. They have Danny Lewis, a veteran, expected back as well. So plenty of depth, plenty of bodies there at that tight end position. You get into the offensive line. Again, Caden Proctor back. Big year for him. Contract year in a lot of ways. Third year could be a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL draft. We'll see. And again, I hear so much of this talk about best offensive line in the country. And my response to that has been, well, let's see it on tape.
Really.
Because, that's where it matters most. But Caden Proctor back at left tackle. Parker Brailsford back. That was a bonus, getting him back for another year at the center position. As you said, Jaden Roberts earlier played a ton of football the last couple of seasons at that one guard spot. Wilkin Formby could be kind of the X factor to all this at right tackle. If he can step in there and he doesn't have to be elite. I've said it before.
Sure.
You go back to some of the earlier Nick Saban teams. Guys like Drew Davis weren't elite at right tackle, but they were damn sure good enough.
Sure.
At that position. Wilkin Formby needs to be something more than serviceable, I would say, but just really solid and consistent on a down in and down out basis. Left guard, I think you're going to still have some pretty good competition there. We talked about Cam Dewberry coming in from the transfer portal. Gino Vandermark played a lot of snaps last year. They've got some talented young guys like Michael Carroll that they brought in as a true freshman. And then there's a guy like Ola Salinan, who it looks like they cross-train a little bit, maybe between guard and tackle. That could factor in from a depth perspective. But as we just outlined here, I mean, just in terms of pieces on the offensive side of the ball, this is very much a college football playoff caliber team with the potential to get a couple of 3 rounds or more into this thing.
And see, they've got 2 or 3 guys like Cole Adams, who is a guy that just – I mean, Travis not great, but he does, as you said a few minutes ago.
They trust him.
They do, and he does things that allows you to move the ball. He can return kicks. I think that's where the trust factor
Yeah.
is. That was now again,
Punts. Yeah.
yeah, and that trust factor was really important to Saban and those coaches. If they trusted you, that was gold. So
Well, last season before his latest injury, that's the biggest concern you have with Cole Adams at this
yes,
point. As you go
yes,
back to his senior year of high school, he's been on a stretch, unfortunately for him,
hmm
that has seen him endure some pretty significant injuries. So,
yeah,
but in terms of being trusted by the coaching
hmm
staff, especially as last season moved along,
yeah,
you saw him start to supplant guys in
yes,
that inside receiver position. Guys like Kobe Prentice and some others,
hmm
they saw their snaps decrease because Cole Adams was getting more and more of those. And you're
yeah,
right, definitely a guy that can also help you perhaps in the punt return game as
hmm
well. We move over to the defensive side of the ball and we stay on the line of scrimmage. And as we
yeah,
talked about earlier a
yeah.
little bit, this looks like a college football playoff sort
Mhm,
of
mhm.
rotation that you have here. And you start with those first three guys up front, Tim Keenan right there in the middle. Then you have James Smith as kind of a three tech in what would be a 4-3. This is more of a 3-3-5. And then LT Overton, who was disruptive for extended stretches in 2024. Didn't always finish
Yes.
on some of those
Yes.
opportunities, but you got to think that'll happen more in 2025. You bring in Kelby Collins from the transfer portal. That to me is going to be interesting once you get beyond, let's say, LT Overton specifically, maybe
Yeah.
James Smith. Is Kelby Collins as a third year guy, is he really going to step in there and kind of be that guy? Or is it going to be a young guy like Jeremiah Beeman who can play that role that James Smith is going to play for him? Edric Hill, another one of those guys.
Yeah. Right.
Keon Keeley, a former 5-star,
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
went through a system change and a position change in the last couple of years. Still kind of waiting on him, probably physically as much as anything else. But again, Overton, Keenan, Smith, just the top three that they're going to put out there should be among the best.
You said something about Overton that I think bears repeating is, I mean, he can get to the quarterback. His thing is, can he get the quarterback to the ground? So I really like him. I mean, the
Yeah, I
80.
mean, he had what last year I call probably 15 spring game sacks. In the spring game,
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Well
quarterback
said.
getting live and you kind of
Yeah.
just get in the
Yeah.
neighborhood and the
Right.
whistle goes off. He lived in the neighborhood.
He did.
He was like
He
Mr.
did.
Rogers in the neighborhood
Uh,
last year. He probably had 15 8A sacks in
yeah.
2024,
Yeah.
but now you want to see him. You're right. Just finish more on the quarterback in 2025.
And Trent, is James Smith one of the upperclassmen? I mean, is it time for him to really step through?
He's
And
he's he's an NFL talent. I don't
he
think
is,
there's
isn't he?
much doubt about that. And this is a great, this is another area of this team where I'm kind of like what I said with the offensive line.
Yes,
Let's see it.
yes,
Let's
I
see it.
agree.
We've been hearing
Yeah,
it about. I mean, think about it. The last great Alabama defensive lineman.
yeah.
I mean,
Great point.
who are you
Yeah,
going back to?
yeah,
Deron Payne at this point? I mean, I guess you could say
yeah,
Christian Barmore,
yeah.
2020, had a
Right.
great season.
Yeah,
Um, so that's Fedarian Mathis. Hey, it's time for
yeah,
another one of those
oh,
defensive
yeah.
linemen. And this is an approach under Kane Womack that really frees up defensive linemen
Yes.
to make plays.
Right.
This isn't the two gapping system that we saw with Nick
Mhm.
Saban. So, it's time for Freddie Roach's guys to step forward in 2025. What about those linebackers, Brent, as we talk about again, what looks to be a very beneficial return for the Crimson Tide and Deontay Lawson, not just in terms of his playmaking ability, although he is coming off a significant injury in his own right, but he can run that show from the
Yes.
middle of the field. You bring back Justin Jefferson, even though Jahad
Yes.
Campbell moves on to the NFL. Justin
Mhm.
Jefferson's a redshirt
Mhm.
senior you brought in Nakai Hill-Green from Colorado via the transfer portal. So more of the inside linebacker types is what we're talking about right here with Jefferson, Lawson, Hill-Green, and a couple of youngsters I think they like as well.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I love when you're talking about linebackers, Quay Russo is, I think, on the verge of, I think he's on the verge of being something special. Do you?
They need him to be. Yeah.
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 He can be, I think, that guy. He's kind of got some Courtney Upshaw to him when I look at Quay Russo. Probably as powerful as he is twitchy, but has a nice combination of both. And, look, out on that edge at that wolf position, they don't really have, or at least established depth there, right? They lost Q Robinson to the NFL, but Russell has definitely played enough at this point that you got to think he could be an upper echelon guy in the Southeastern Conference. But they're kind of waiting on Yanze Pierre. Justin Hill is a true freshman that I think has a very bright future at that spot as well. Just kind of like the inside linebackers. They've got quality guys, quality talent. But with Lawson, I liked them going out and getting Nakai Hill-Green because, well, you had Jefferson and Lawson dealing with some stuff going into the spring. And certainly Lawson's was pretty significant, as we knew at the end of last season. So you always need quality depth, and to be able to go out and get an experienced guy like Hill-Green, that's a real bonus, I think, for the interior linebacker positions. And then you kind of shift into that secondary, and you always want to have two accomplished corners, and it looks like Alabama's going to have that, Brent, with Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown, and they're still going to have good competition at those spots too.
Listen, when I think about the secondary, the guy I love the most there is Bray Hubbard. I remember doing the Comcast Game of the Week and being at the bowl school and talking to Corky Rogers, who Travis and I consider one of maybe the greatest high school coaches ever been. Corky made a statement and said, he's not the most athletic kid. He doesn't run the fastest than anybody else, but on every play he's where he's supposed to be.
You know what? I think Bray Hubbard's going to have a chance to maybe show that he is more of that athlete than some people anticipate. But you're absolutely correct. The one thing that stood out about him a year ago, and one of the real benefits, one of the silver linings of Keon Sabb going out, and kind of some situations that forced Bray Hubbard maybe onto the field, was that you learned a lot about his preparation on a week-to-week basis, because you never really worried about him busting coverages or doing things like that. And now you put him with Keon Sabb, and I'll say this, I think in terms of that tandem, as far as what's in front of them making plays, I'm really excited. What I'm not as certain about, I wouldn't say it's a concern, because it's something we're going to, I think, learn more about. Although I think Sabb at times, when he was healthy enough last year, you saw him at times, his eyes sort of betrayed him a little bit. And you can get, I think, Sabb, because of his aggressive nature in terms of what's in front of him, you can maybe get him to take the cheese from time to time. I worry more about the vertical deep ball type of situation. Although, again, I thought Bray Hubbard at times is sort of a middle of the field type of guy when he was in that role, looked to do okay. And, but again, with Jackson and Xavier Brown, that should free you up to do some different things with your safeties. And then also at that Husky position, Deshaun Jones looks like he could be the guy to beat there, the former Wake Forest transfer. And then again, depth is a friend of this team. Even on the back end, they really came through the portal process in pretty good shape. And if anything, they added a portalist or two, and then some really promising true freshmen. When you talk about Dijon Lee, a 6'4" corner, you talk about Chuck McDonald coming into this thing. Ivan Taylor is a freshman. Boy, the numbers look good, Brent.
Well, and look, the thing that really makes me wonder about this secondary is. Now they've got obviously they've got Wisconsin early. I mean, they're okay offensively, but they don't have the Georgia wide receivers. Zachariah Branch is coming in from Southern Cal. The Thomas
Yeah.
kid's coming over too. But I will say this, Trav, they could be really, really solid by the time November comes around, when they've got to deal with those LSU wide receivers and those Auburn wide receivers. That they, it's not to say that they won't need them before then, but by November and in the playoffs, Trav, they may be ready for just about be able to play with anybody.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. Again, another area where you've got a nice combination of experience and talent. You've got a year in this Kane Womack system for a lot of these guys, really from front to back. So I think a lot of this leads us into the schedule for the Alabama Crimson Tide, because for me, if there's, sort of a red flag after last season, it's the road. And I don't think it's as much of a shortcoming for Alabama in 2024 as it was being merely mortal. We were so used to watching Alabama, as much as anything, go on the road and take people's hearts out and show it to them in their own stadiums. I mean, under Nick Saban. And the thing you forget is, before Nick Saban, Mike Shula, some of the previous coaches, they won one or two road games a year in the conference.
Really? Yes.
It was, wow, that's pretty good. Under Saban, if they didn't go 4-0 on the road in the SEC, it was like, whoa, what's the matter with this? What's the matter with Saban? What's the matter with this team? Probably one of the most mind-boggling stats, if you really want to go back and add it up. Go back and add up from about 2008 through 2023, Alabama's SEC road record.
Yeah, it's
amazing. Add that up.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers across the board are crazy if you do that. But specifically, just go back and look at the SEC road record for Alabama under Nick Saban. And I think we were reminded of how insane those numbers were by the fact that Alabama went on the road last year, lost at Vanderbilt, lost at Tennessee, lost to a 6-6 Oklahoma team. So, it was probably, as much as anything for me, it was back to reality where that aspect of this team is concerned.
Well, and look, I think they'll beat Florida State and Wisconsin. They just got a better roster than both of them. And then I think they'll be up for Georgia, obviously, and they'll match Georgia. I mean, they've got as much talent as Georgia does. My concern for them is, after the Georgia game, they've got Vanderbilt, and then they go to Missouri. And see, those are the games last year that they struggle with. Now, look, there's no question that they'll be up for Tennessee. Now, the problem is, after that, they go to South Carolina, another road game. But that's the mindset. Again, when we come back to that, particularly when they were, and people hope that would just anomaly instead of something that's going to happen every year. But Trav, again, when you're a double-digit underdog and you lose games, having to deal with that, to me, that's one of the greatest challenges for this team this year, is to get that turned around.
Yeah, it is. As you said, open with Florida State August 30th, 2:30 Central. That game on ABC from Doak Campbell Stadium in Tally. ULM is going to be a non-con the following Saturday. Then, as you said, Wisconsin on September the 13th, and then you get a bye week. I like where the buys kind of fall in here for Alabama. I know in a lot of years you look at Alabama's schedule and there's a lot of teams with bye weeks before they get Alabama. But I think where the Crimson Tide could use those two the most this season, that's where they're going to get them. Now, I think
Yeah.
we'll see. Missouri lost so much on the offensive side of the ball.
And they did, yes.
And I think defensively, though, they can still be a problem in some ways in Como. But what would you say is the defining stretch here as we look at the schedule? Georgia at Vanderbilt. I think it stages out well for
Yeah.
the Crimson Tide. I think
Agree.
maybe, if anything, South Carolina on the road, and then bye week LSU, and then Oklahoma the following Saturday in Tuscaloosa.
Right.
We'll see how John Mateer and that thing kind of gets off the ground there in the early stages in Norman. But as far as a map to the college football playoff, what would you kind of point to with this schedule?
Look, I think they could be. I think, and this is a 10-2 kind of type schedule for them. Frankly,
Yeah.
I think they could. I think that they could win double-digit games. Now, one thing that's going to be incredibly important for them, and whoever the quarterback is, particularly, and we'll go with Ty Simpson for right now, is and this was a real problem they had on the road. Trav, they did not, as Tom Coughlin would say, they didn't value the football the way they should have. And listen, Trav, when you do that and you're on the road and you give, even last year, Josh Heupel's offense in Tennessee a 30-yard field instead of an 80-yard field.
Yeah.
At that point, you've got some issues. So I think as you see in these games, that their ability to cut down their turnovers is going to be crucial for how they do.
Yeah, I go back to the road is what I go back to. I go back to the road just like last year. I mean, you're going to go to Georgia. You're going to go to Como. You're going to go to Cola, South Carolina on the road, and then Auburn. I know we're kind of wondering if Auburn is sort of fallen into this trench of 6-7 wins.
Yeah.
But as we know, that can be a house of horrors for any Alabama coach, including Nick Saban prior to Kalen DeBoer. But yeah, I look at this schedule and I think it's manageable for sure in terms of how it lays out. Tough teams. I think the intrigue with that opener with Florida State, with Thomas Castellano at the quarterback position, and Gus Malzahn, the Gus Bus now in Tallahassee, dialing up those offensive plays. I think the expectation from this fan base for Alabama isn't just going to be to go to Tallahassee and win.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be to go to Tallahassee and win by double digits.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And we just don't know what we can get for them. And again, there'll be a lot written about Gus Malzahn, but look, this Florida State team is certainly been struggling in many ways. But that they get Vandy, they get Tennessee, and they get Oklahoma, who they lost to, all in Bryant Denny. So that's going to certainly help them a lot.
It should. South Carolina, though, at that point on the schedule will be interesting.
Yeah, yes, it will be.
Because will they have lived up to some of the preseason expectations as October winds down? And how has that roster held up in terms of injuries and health? Because we all know the frontline players that South Carolina is going to put out there in 2025, but you have some injuries even at places like Alabama and Georgia these days because the transfer portal takes a lot of your depth. It can be problematic from those programs, but what kind of shape is South Carolina in when Alabama makes that trip to Williams-Brice Stadium on October the 25th? I think it's interesting when you think about the three perceived favorites in the SEC for 2025, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, as we talked about with Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. Georgia with a new starting quarterback, Texas with a new starting quarterback, Alabama. But we mentioned this a previous show or two ago. it sets up nice for Georgia from a schedule perspective because you get Alabama,
Yes.
Texas, and Ole Miss
Yeah.
in Athens.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from
Really.
that standpoint, you kind of like where Georgia's at. But then you think about the lack of success Georgia's had against, let's say, Alabama, whether it's been in Atlanta and Athens too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, there are a couple of guys I wanted to ask you about. One of them to me that's fascinating is Jalen Mbakwe.
Yeah.
Trav, this is a guy who could be. I mean, he could be special.
Yep.
Frankly, and it's going to be with his athleticism. It really is going to be very interesting. Now, I don't think he's necessarily going to get lost in the shuffle. I think he's good enough to make a name on his own. But I'm curious. Do you see him really developing this year and them using him in a variety of ways?
Just a heck of an athlete, dynamic. It's hard to imagine him going 2 or 3 years without making some type of
Exactly.
impact.
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
last year was kind of developmental year for him, and I think that was going to be the case whether Mbakwe started out on defense or
Mhm.
offense at Alabama because he was essentially just a damn football player at Clay
Yeah.
Chalk
Oh, yeah.
and one of the
Absolutely.
very best you'll ever see on the high school level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just put the ball in his hands and kind of let him do his thing wherever you lined him up, including quarterback and in the
Mhm.
return game. So, yeah, I'm anxious to see how he continues to develop as a positional player. Or is he a guy that you use situationally? Um, I think he's got some traits. Remember Percy Harvin,
Oh,
University of Florida?
mercy.
And
Yes.
how Urban Meyer in Florida would use
Yeah.
Percy Harvin. They'd line him up
Right.
in the backfield, line him up out
Yeah.
wide. Now, I'm not saying Mbakwe is ever going to be
Yeah.
Percy Harvin,
Right. Right.
but I think he has some of those dynamic traits to
Mhm.
use like that.
Yes.
But when you've already got Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Isaiah Horton as your top three wide receivers, and you're still bringing in quality guys year in and year out. You're hoping Jalen Hale's coming back from that
Yes.
knee
Yes.
injury he sustained in 2020, going into before the 2024 season. It
Mhm.
cost him all of last season. So, I mean, there's still some dudes. It wasn't like moving from corner where you had Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just going to automatically free you up for a
Mhm.
starting job on the offensive side. There's places like Alabama, there's nowhere to kind of hide out
No.
and jump
No.
right into the starting lineup. That's just not going to be the case. But he does have those type of traits that you want to get involved. And when that's the
Yeah.
case, that's very beneficial to you because people like Ryan Grubb, they'll figure out ways, your special teams people, they'll figure out ways to get you involved. But there's also that trust word we talked about earlier with Cole Adams that you have to
Exactly.
develop as well. And so, that may be as much of it for him, for Mbakwe, as there is anything else. Ability wise, those type of things, uh, I have no doubt. And that's why I don't think at this point, I've thought about BJ Scott, a guy named BJ Scott, Burton
Yeah.
Scott,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
early in the Nick Saban era, was just a hell of a high school football
It
player down in the
was.
Mobile area.
Yeah.
I think Viger and 5-star, was
Yeah.
going to Alabama,
Yeah. Yeah.
playmaker, and he just never really found a home
No. No.
positionally. Um, and I'm not near to that point yet with Mbakwe, but I'm just saying there are
No.
situations where it kind of sometimes plays out that way. But he's an intriguing, fascinating player that you really are interested to see how they get involved in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, two things here. One of the great Nick Saban quotes was on Scott. He said, since I've gotten here, that's all I've heard is about how great this guy is. And we haven't seen him do anything yet.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know,
And look, and that's true. But Nick also knows, or I think he certainly knew, getting BJ Scott to Alabama was
mm,
huge for
yes.
Alabama
Yeah,
and sort of getting that stronghold back
no
down
question.
there in the Mobile area
Oh,
because
yeah.
everything else that followed that commitment of BJ Scott was Mark Barron, Julio Jones. I
Yes.
mean, the
Yeah.
list just
Yes.
goes on and on when you
And
think
listen,
about it.
I also want to bring this up too. In this league, you've got to have a kicker.
Yeah,
And if you're and to me, it's not so much can you kick 165 yards.
no,
What I want to know is can you kick it 38 yards in the fourth quarter in Baton
from
Rouge?
the
You
from the left
know,
hash.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So Travis Talty, has he bided his
Connor
time?
Talty.
Is he ready to be the guy?
The feedback's been positive, for him. So it sounds like he's in that position. But you got to play it pretty well too. You snap it, and Alabama's replacing all three of those specialists for the 2025 season. Um, so yeah, I mean, until you see that guy do it in those type of situations, it's a question mark. There's no doubt about it. Tex Hyder checking in here, Brent. He says, "Howdy,
Thank you,
boys."
Tex.
Tex, how we doing,
Howdy,
my man?
howdy.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're in agreement on this Alabama team. Definitely a legitimate national
Oh yeah,
championship contender.
yeah,
Now,
yes,
variables throughout the course of a longer season than it's ever been that you're not quite sure about. For me, it still goes back to how this team progresses on the road as compared
no
to a year
question.
ago. I know we
Mhm.
talked about how those losses from a year ago flip back to home games, but you're still going to have some formidable tests away from Bryant Denny Stadium. But year two under Kalen DeBoer with Ryan Grubb this time
Yeah,
around.
yeah, that's going to be fascinating. And look, for Alabama fans, one thing that they need to look at, as well as other SEC fans, is what's this format going to be in the conference. And the
Yeah.
reason I say that is, look, if they go to 16 teams, we're going to see teams in the playoffs at 9-3. If they've got a strong strength of schedule,
Hmm.
and how important that's going to be, and for team. And look, I'm not saying that's going to take away from the season and so forth, but I think it's important to note that's where things are changing. Trav, I mean, you get in now certainly with 10-2 to where you were either 12-0 or 11-1, and if you were any worse than that, they would leave you out. That's not where this thing's going now as we expand the
Oh,
playoffs.
no, it's not. It definitely is not. Well, it's been a lot of fun getting Bama
Always.
specific with you on a Thursday night. Always enjoy it, my friend. Always a good time, and we look forward to doing it again soon.
Trav, I'll end with this. Our show mascot, Chino,
Yeah.
unfortunately, one of the most difficult things I've ever done. We had to put Chino to sleep yesterday. I had him for 19 years. He certainly showed up when he heard Travis's voice. He would hop up here on the desk and make his appearance known. So anybody who's lost a pet understands uh, how grueling and difficult that can be. So I at least wanted to let people know that, and in an effort to be transparent here. So, but he had a good life. We did everything we could to make him comfortable, and just very very grateful for him. Thank you, Tex Sider.
Yeah.
But there will be better days, and his memory and presence still hangs over our podcast very heavily.
Yeah. Yep. Chino was a staple. I mean, he would make his
Mhm.
presence felt very early in
Yeah,
the show.
yes,
It was always a welcome sight to see our pal sort of jump up there and say
that's right.
hello and rest easy, pal. Chino, sadly, has left us. So, Brent, our condolences. Know it's tough as a pet parent. I know some people
Mhm.
say pet owner. No, 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 no.
That's
It,
right.
it,
Yeah,
if you've been there, you kind of know what we're talking about, and sincerest condolences. And, we're thinking about it. Sure. Hey, Brent, let's do it again soon.
good. We'll look forward to it, pal. Take care.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you for joining us right here on the Reier on YouTube channel. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Reier on YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. That way you're notified as to all of our content as it drops here on Reier on YouTube. And as Tex Tider told you just a few seconds ago, hit that thumbs up. That thumbs up, a like would help us out tremendously as well. For Brent, I'm Travis. And until next time, so long, everybody.